My name is Alec Gerbec. I'm with Umpqua Feather Merchants. Today we'll be tying a tan Alphlexo crab. Let's get started. So yeah, as far as the development of this fly, as with most flies these days, they are a version of something else that's just been improved, right? So when in the Seychelles, we saw a lot of different crab patterns, and we saw little attributes we liked of a certain few flies, one being the Orvis Crab. That's going to be using the flexo tubing as the body, but just kind of had some inferior materials and just the design wasn't quite there. So the guides and myself, we started playing around, and every day on the water we'd have a new version of this fly out there, testing. And after about a full season of playing, we finally found the Alphlexo crab. A couple things, just what I'm doing, two parts that are important is I'm creating a bigger thread dam back here at the bend and a bigger thread dam right behind the eye. And that's going to allow me to adhere the flexo tubing with glue a little bit better. Let's slide this on. So these crabs can be tied in many versions, many colors, sizes. With orange beads like you see here, without orange beads. This is probably one of the trickier parts here, is how to cleanly attach the flexo tubing. So I've done two loose wraps. I'm going to use now my finger to kind of get it in place. I'm going to loosen up, reorient my thread so it's pretty close to the edge. And now I am just going to start winding down towards the edge of that flexo tubing, trying to clean it up. Fish absolutely don't care. If this was a guide fly I was heading out tomorrow, I would not worry about making a real clean, tight edge here. But since we're tying a video, we're going to clean it up. So now that we're here, obviously it'd be really hard to whip finish over this. Since I made that thread dam underneath the flexo tubing, I can just take my crazy glue now. As long as I'm pretty liberal, it's going to soak through, and I can just cut this thread off without making a knot. So yeah, we played with legs a lot. We liked rubber legs initially, but they were just too fragile in salt water. We saw those things breaking, failing, getting bitten off like crazy, so we wanted to go to a stronger material that still had a lot of movement. So that's where we went to the chenille. The chenille was a game changer, but it was also doing lots of crazy stuff with the fly. The fly was often floating up or sinking upside down. So orientation of those legs when we go in to the body material is quite important. So now what I've done is I've just made a couple wraps around my finger with that thread, one loose wrap around the body. I'm going to push the material just barely, tighten it up with that hand holding the thread, and then I'm going to do a couple more wraps here. Okay, cut off that tag. Now I'm going to use my fingers to flatten that body out. So one of the first things we were experimenting with was body shape. If it's a nice flat disc, it's going to sink well. The idea behind this body too is that it's going to penetrate the water nice and quick. I'm just going to use a little side cutter here to cut this material. Now before I decide to whip finish and be done with the tying portion of this, I'm just going to come in now and cut this back. I'm going to close your eyes as you do it, because it's going to be flying in your face. So now I'm going to come back with my thread, just clean up those cut ends before I whip finish. Today we're using a Tiemco bobbin and deer hair scissors. These are my absolute favorite, very fine tip and sharp all the way to the tip so I can get in there. And then I'm using some of the new Dreamstream Plus tools by Umpqua, the mini bodkin whip finisher. So yeah, very non-traditional tie, because now I'm done with thread materials. Now it's more like model building. So now I'm gonna for the legs, be using a ultra chenille. And I'm going to cut portions out. So I'm going to make 3 legs and 1 set of claws. So with the legs, just a rough cut of about 1.5 inches. I'm going to do 3 of those. Those will be later trimmed down. Okay, and then for the claws, I'm actually going to double up the material. It's really good to measure this out so you have kind of a uniform claw length as you make a number of these. Typically I make a bunch of bodies and then I build them. On my desk at home, I actually use a very similar mat, just the big one, and my measurement is actually the whole hairline. So www.hairline.com is what I use for my claw size. So I know that's going to be my length here. I'm going to cut that. I'm going to double this over, like so. A pair of tweezers. I'm just going to tie a little overhand knot. The tweezers help out quite a bit with this part. So I've got them in there. Oop. Okay, so they're nice and loose right now still. Just make sure when you tighten this down, your knot seat's nice and clean, because you got to pull it through that flexo body, and that can be a challenge. Okay, so that knot's nice and clean. I'm going to tighten it up. Now that doubled over end, I'm going to do the same thing, also tie an overhand knot using those tweezers. Maybe. Tighten that up. Okay. So as far as now inserting the legs, there's a couple different ways. I've seen guys use leather needles. I've seen guys use long tweezers like this. I'm going to use a piece of Barracuda bite wire, it's just single strand that I've doubled it over to pretty much look like a bobbin threader. Don't use the bobbin threader, it will break. That's why we've gone with the heavy duty. So now I'm just going to bring it through the body like this. Quite important that you bring it through the absolute edge or side of the crab. If you go onto the belly, your fly is going to flip upside down, which we don't want. I'm going to take my first piece, stick it in, pull it through. Now with the second one, I'm just going to work my way up the body a little bit. Pull through. What's interesting is when we developed this in the Seychelles, it was pretty much specifically for permit and triggerfish. We were very curious to see how it'd do over in the States, and since the introduction with Umpqua, it's heard people catching permit in Belize, in Cuba, in Florida, in Mexico, but also guys with the redfish in shallow, skinny water are starting to fish these. Being pretty productive. Also, one of the guys I tied these for, he fished stripers up in the Northeast and was having good luck, so there's no limit. Okay, so I have my legs. You can see here. I'm just going to take the time to kind of sort them out, make sure they're long enough on each side before I cut them, straighten them out. And then I'm just going to touch where the leg meets the body with some crazy glue. Just barely, so those legs still have a lot of movement. Okay. So I'll trim those later once I get the claw in. as it's drying, you might just orient the legs again so they're sitting exactly how you want them to. Okay, so for the claw now, again, I'm going to try to come right through the side or the edge of the body. Give yourself some good spacing because you're going to need to stick some eyes in between them here. Just going to take my claw. This is pretty tough, so I'm going to now bring that knot right into the edge. I'm going to use my index finger to help kind of push it through. If you don't glue well, sometimes you can pull some of that flexo tubing out of your tie. So just be careful. It is a little time consuming, but come on, baby. Yeah, it's good to let your glue dry completely too, so you don't have any failure. There we go, there's one, there's two. Okay, so it's made it through. Again, I am going to glue just at the base of the claw to the body on this front claw. Now on this back claw, I want it to stay pretty rigid, so as a crab swims, he's typically got this motion. I want this leg to always kind of stand out just so that profile stays the same. So I'm going to glue up the shank of that claw arm a bit more. Okay, so now I'm going to come in and trim. You don't want your legs too long, so I'm going to just slightly taper off to that first cut. And you'll get a feel for it. You'll fish some and your crab will look like a piece of spaghetti out there if your legs are too long. The claws, same sort of deal. Now I'm going to burn the edges to get a nice round taper or natural taper here. Okay, now some eyes. I'm going to take some hard mono. I find that mono burns a lot nicer than fluorocarbon to make eyes. You can make eyes out of UV, epoxy. I just find that the burnt is probably the most durable. So I'm just going to take the lighter to this, get it started, let it beat up a little bit. Blow it out. Then when I let it dry, I hold it completely upside down so you get a nice symmetrical eye here. It'll start to go opaque. That's when you know it's dry and you can handle it. There's one eye. Same thing again. Get it started, let it beat up. Hang it upside down to let it dry. I'm going to come in, Sharpie, just color that eye up nice and dark. On some of my versions, like my white or clear, I actually just leave that burnt mono color, kind of that nice yellowy brown. It's got a good look to it. The tans and the olives, I do the black eye. So when putting in eyes, again, I'm not tying these in, so they can fall out quite easily if you don't do this right. So when I come into the body, I'm actually going to try to feed that mono in between the two claw chenilles. So when I glue, the mono is going to adhere to those claws, and that'll maybe make sense here in a minute. So let me get this second eye colored up. This is where the bodkin can come in handy. Make yourself a little guide hole. So now I'm just going to look at orientation of the eye. I think that's a pretty good spread there. So I'm going to push these back out now. Put a little dab of glue on the shank of that mono. I'm going to pull it tight. It's only going to take a second or two to adhere. Then I'm going to just look at my spacing one more time on that other eye, feeling good about that. Do the same for this side. So you can see now when I push on this one, it's in there, it's not going anywhere. Eventually they will fall out, fish will still eat without an eye, but it'll at least catch your first fish. So getting pretty close to done. Last thing is, I always add a weed guard to this. I never know where I'm going to be fishing it, but you can always cut off a weed guard. You can't necessarily add it that easy. So I'm going to add some hard nylon here. What you do, instead of tying in the weed guard, I'm just going to push it through the body. So on either side of the shank of the hook, I'm going to feed that through the body. And then it's going to poke through on this side, and I'm just going to make sure I'm happy with where it's coming out. It's looking pretty good. Take a little glue, hit the bend there, pull it tight. And I just kind of play with it, make sure it straightens out nicely. When we cut, just go just long of the point of the hook. And there you have it. You could stop right here. This will fish very well. I tend to add some segmentation with markers. So I'll just take any said plastic bag, take this out of the vise. I'm going to mark it up. So I'm just going to come in here, add a couple spots. You could probably do this in the vise too, your preference. A couple on the claws. And then depending on the fishery, some guides really swear by a red claw, so I'm going to add that. And my final touch is going to be black tips on the legs. So there you have it, finished product, the Alphlexo. The thing about this crab is, since it's got that translucent body where water can travel through it, you can actually land it quite close because you're going to weight it pretty lightly. So yeah, we got these materials here at Anglers All in all the colors and sizes, and we got the materials to tie them, so come on down and grab them.